You see what sending out them negative waves did, Moriarty?
But oddball, I did try and tell them, but they won't listen. I tried.
Sure.
But I did try.
Oh, man. Don't hit me with them negative waves so early in the morning.
But I can't force them to listen. I can't.
Always with the negative waves, Moriarty. Always with the negative waves.
Have a little faith, baby. Have a little faith.
But I keep trying. Oddball, I keep trying. But they won't listen. They won't tune in. They really won't.
Why don't you knock it off with them negative waves? Why don't you dig how beautiful it is out here? Why don't you say something righteous and hopeful for a change?
Tune in to Awake Radio for your positive waves.
Thank you for listening to Organic News here on Awake Radio, where we try to give you news that is organic. Hello and welcome to another Tuesday of Organic News on Awake Radio. And we do have with us, I'm going to get moving right to it, Attorney Bruce Afran, who is involved in suing the Obama administration, along with another lawyer, Carl Mayer, and Chris Hedges, Tangerine Bolin, and Alexa O'Brien are all involved in suing the Obama administration over the NDAA, which is the National Defense Authorization Act. So welcome. Thank you so much. I wasn't sure if you were going to be able to be on, Bruce. I was starting to get a little bit worried that you weren't going to be able to make it, but I'm glad.
That's great.
I'm glad you're able to be with us. I've been wanting to interview you, since last year. So I'm glad you're finally able to be on. So I'm just trying to remember the last that I heard. This was supposed to be going to the Supreme Court. That you, Carl, Chris Hedges, and the rest had won the initial case, and then the government attorneys aggressively were appealing, and I know it was supposed to go to the Supreme Court. I think they won. Did they not win?
Yes. What happened is Judge Catherine Forrest of the District Court in Manhattan declared the law unconstitutional. Just for your listeners, it's a statute signed by the president on New Year's Eve, December 2011, that allows any person who gives substantial support to Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, or their associated forces, whatever that should mean, to be detained by the U.S. military without a trial and even moved to foreign locations. And Chris Hedges, Tangerine Bolin, Alexa O'Brien, Daniel Ellsberg, Noam Chomsky, all joined together in bringing this suit. Carl Mayer is my co-counsel. And we persuaded the district court that this law was unconstitutional. It punished speech. Those who might do some advocacy or writing that could be deemed in support of these groups would be subject to detention.
Right.
And the judge declared this unconstitutional. The government appealed, and the government got a reversal. And now we are asking the Supreme Court to take the case. And in fact, just today, I'm writing one of the briefs in that matter right now. So that's where we are today.
And I believe that Chris Hedges is involved in this, being a journalist, like that, and Alexa O'Brien, that it was going to apply to them as journalists, that they can't even be a journalist out of, fear that just doing their job is going to make them complicit in aiding the enemy in some way.
Well, that's the danger of a law that's very vague. It allows the government the power to use it arbitrarily. And Chris Hedges and Alexa and Jennifer Bolin, Tangerine Bolin as she's often known, don't know whether their work could invoke them in this law. And where a law is vague and it doesn't define the conduct that can result in detention, it's normally unconstitutional because it does what we call chill speech. It discourages people from speaking. And that's considered a violation of the American First Amendment that guarantees freedom of speech.
Exactly. And the fact that the government attorneys aggressively appealed, your victory, and it was kind of being discussed that the Obama administration had already been using the NDAA, and that's why they were so aggressive to appeal it.
Well, when we had the trial, Judge Forrest asked the government attorneys, well, are you using this statute?
Right.
And the government lawyers said, well, we can't really tell you because we don't know which statutes are used to detain people. That leaves open the real possibility that the government is, in fact, detaining people under this law. And, of course, we know from recent history that these things are kept secret. And so the public does not know when a different type of detention law has been used. Now, hopefully the government is not using it, but we can only understand that they're pushing to defend this in the way they have because they intend to retain the power to use it. President Obama has gone much further in this direction than President Bush ever went. The Obama administration has much more aggressively sought these powers.
I was there that day for the hearing when she nearly was going to hold the government attorney in contempt of court when he couldn't answer the question as to whether or not they were already using it or who they were already using it on. And go ahead.
Well, that's exactly what happened. She said, well, if you people can't answer that question, you may very well be in contempt. And that's something that really shook the government sitting in the courtroom.
Yeah, I was very happy myself to hear her say that. I mean, she seemed to be, right, like not screwing around and not, being intimidated by, government lawyers or, I mean, I don't spend a lot of time in court myself, so I was really like relieved to hear her be very disciplined with him about that. And I was hoping she was gonna hold him in contempt.
Well, that would be an extreme measure. Forrest did her job. She independently looked at the government's actions, and she acted as a federal judge should.
Right. And so she's no longer on this case. They got somebody new, right?
Well, the case went to the appeals court, and so she is no longer the trial judge. Now we're asking the Supreme Court to take it. If they take it, it will go to the Supreme Court and maybe go back to her eventually.
Oh,
we don't know what will happen. We're asking the Supreme Court to take the case and to hold that these plaintiffs have standing. They have the right to challenge this law.
So so where it stands now, you're just still waiting for it to go to the Supreme Court.
We submitted our request for the Supreme Court to take the case. The government last week submitted its reply brief. We now have a rebuttal brief, and I'm writing that as we speak. I was writing it just before we started this interview. The Supreme Court will probably make a decision sometime in the next 2 or 3 months as to whether they're taking the case, and we'll know then. If they take the case, there'll be a whole set of briefs drafted, probably for the fall, and the case will get argued sometime in probably October or November.
And if they don't take it?
If they don't take the case, then this comes to an end, and the law will remain on the books until possibly some other group that may be imminently threatened with detention should challenge the statute. Right now, the Court of Appeals has held that our journalist plaintiffs are not imminently threatened with detention, and therefore they don't have the right to challenge the law. And one of the things, Catherine, that we have argued is that when speech rights are threatened by a statute, one doesn't have to show that the government is about to arrest him before he can challenge the law. It's enough that the threat of arrest chills one's willingness to speak. That's what we call the chilling effect of a law that's unconstitutional.
Well,
And so if a law threatens someone with detention because of their speech, that's always been held to be enough to let them go to court to challenge the law.
Well, that's kind of, like the whole point is that they're bringing this NDAA, they're signing it, in because they want to say that, at the slightest move by a journalist or anybody else that chills them, they can detain and indefinitely. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, they can do it, but you can't.
Well, it's hard to know why the law was brought in the first place. I would hope the government's purpose is not to threaten journalists, but the very existence of this law is a threat. We have to remember, in U.S. history, there have been many times when people have been jailed because of their speech.
Right.
We forget that at the time of World War I, tens of thousands went to prison for opposing the draft in World War I and later opposing the entrance of the U.S. into the Russian Civil War in 1920 and 21. Tens of thousands of people, including Eugene Debs, a former candidate for president, went to prison. In the McCarthy-era government, penalties were imposed upon people who were communists or associated with the Communist Party. So these types of things are not unknown, and laws that are broad have been used to squelch and stifle freedom of expression. So these are real fears.
So let me ask you then, you said that, it's possible that it won't go to the Supreme Court, unless, if it doesn't go to the Supreme Court and then more groups would be needed in order to, challenge it again. So like, as it stands now, how would other people be able to, join in supporting this, like, so that it does go to the Supreme Court? Is there any way for just people who want to support this to help it along in the process so that it goes to the Supreme Court?
Well, no. Organizations can later on submit briefs to the Supreme Court expressing their agreement with us. But if the court does not take the case is over. It may be that there'll be other people who are threatened with detention, perhaps an Arab American activist, perhaps an immigrant from an Arab country who has been told he is the subject of investigation. In that case, they may have closer standing to satisfy the court, and the case could be brought again. If the court does not take the case now, it ends for now, and there may be other people who are threatened with detention, or investigation anyway, simply because of their foreign background, that might have the standing to make a new challenge. And so if people like that exist, and they've been threatened with detention or investigation, then of course we would talk to them and see whether they could challenge such a law.
But the thing is, it doesn't only just apply to journalists or people like that, because just last night I went to an event. They have it the first Monday of every month. It's called No Separate Justice, and it's held right here in Lower Manhattan at 150 Park Row at the Metropolitan Correction Center, where they have indefinitely detained people, in this facility, like right now, who are being exposed to pre-trial solitary confinement and torture, and people, just last night I just have to bring it up. The name of the Sharif, they called the guy, because every single month they highlight a different detainee. And last night was a guy they were calling Sharif, and Sally Eberhardt, who's kind of facilitating, and she's organizing these events. That they read about exactly why these people were detained. And like we were just talking about before, it's very, very fuzzy. Very, very questionable things that these people have done. The government right away wants to, think people are terrorists or, things like that when, they're only like 15 years old or, just, okay, I was
Well,
able...
Catherine, let me say this. Those people are detained by the police. And they're not detained in a military prison. And so they are not really under this law. It may be that people are held in a jail by the police and their conditions are uncomfortable, but that doesn't put them under this particular statute.
I mean, they're calling, they're jailing or detaining these people under, with terrorism, calling them, right, that they're like aiding a terrorist.
Well, there's a certain statute that makes it illegal to give material support to a terrorist group, and that could be money, training, ammunition. That's different from the issue we're dealing with, which deals with something much vaguer. If you give substantial support, what does that mean? If you just write an article that's sympathetic, is that enough to result in detention? That's what's wrong with a law like this. It's vague enough that you don't know what the rules are. The material support law does contain definitions, and it does say you can't give training, you can't give money, you can't give ammunition, you can't give arms, you can't give food supplies. Those are not speech activities. But this law is much vaguer and embraces speech. And that's its danger because people who would write about these subjects may be afraid to. Imagine a lawyer who raises money for Guantanamo inmates for their defenses, for their legal defense fund. They're all former members of Al-Qaeda or the Taliban. Is that lawyer substantially supporting Al-Qaeda or the Taliban by raising money for the legal defenses of these Guantanamo inmates? That's the danger of this law, that people who do legitimate advocacy work will be afraid to because they won't know whether they're subject to detention. And you're right, putting people in detention for vague claims of supporting terrorism is something that is related to this issue. We've seen a real change in this country from claims of clear showing of probable cause to rather vague concepts of giving support to terrorist groups. What does that really mean? If an Arab-American professor endorses Al-Qaeda's action, is he giving support to Al-Qaeda? We're lurching closer and closer to an era when speech itself will be criminalized in certain areas, and that's why we're fighting this case.
Well, I mean, they when there are protests going on in the city, they set up free speech zones, which are about the size of like a prison cell half the time when they come out with the barricades, for people protesting, to be in their little free speech zones. So it's
Well, Catherine, that's exactly one of the changes we've seen over the last 10 years or so, that we've lost legal respect for free speech and for protest. And protest now is being looked at very often by our police as something that's inherently wrong, rather than being an actual protected right. And so, more and more we're suspicious of anyone who protests in public. And we bring the police out to monitor them and sometimes to limit them in very narrow places. I once heard of a case in which protesters protesting the president's policies were forced to be 1,000 feet away from Air Force One when the president left the plane. Rather than being able to be visible so their signs were seen, they had to be in a place where the president could not even know they were present. That defeats the whole point of protest.
Exactly.
And rounding up people and putting them into little closet areas and say this is where your free speech can be exercised is contrary to the whole purpose of the Constitution.
Exactly. And, I filmed like a lot of, protests in the streets and people, getting arrested because they don't have a permit. Since when do you need a permit to have free speech? If I could, I just wanted to read to you from the vigil last night in front of the Metropolitan Correction Center. It's called No Separate Justice. And last night, the vigil focused on the case of Ehsanul Siddiqui, who is known as Shifa to his friends and family. The U.S. government started monitoring Shifa in 2001 when he was just 15 years old. In April 2006, Shifa was kidnapped and arrested in Bangladesh just days after he had married his wife, Happy. The charges against him were that he made false statements in an August 2005 interview with the FBI. These charges would later be dropped and changed instead to 4 terrorism charges that included casing videos is in quotes, of Washington, D.C. landmarks, and by engaging in rudimentary paramilitary training, again, which is also in quotes, by going to a paintball park in Georgia. The evidence against Shifa was marked secret until a few months before his trial and consisted mostly of his translations of Arabic religious and political texts for Tibian publication and online conversations of teenagers about religion. Just again,
well, I think that he would have standing to challenge this statute, even under the Court of Appeals' more restrictive view of the right to go to court. Because certainly where he's been investigated, accused of paramilitary activities, a ridiculous example of going to a paintball park, demonstrates he has a real fear of detention someday. And so someone in his position really meets even the Court of Appeals' very strict rule about who could challenge this law. What you're seeing there is that the government is looking at ordinary people and ordinary things and looking for excuses to investigate and prosecute them.
Right.
I don't know what he's done in his life, but going to a paintball park is not paramilitary activity.
Right. It's like the government and military are just expanding, overreaching, like ridiculously. Anything that anybody does. And what about? What about them? Bush. With Bush, like eavesdropping. Without a warrant on people's emails and phone conversations. I mean, that's been, brought out by people like Thomas Drake, the whistleblower, who, again, like they tried to charge under the Espionage Act. I mean, it's just like ludicrous. It's like they want to criminalize, like innocent people and people, whistleblowing and exposing, the stuff that they're doing.
Well, this is what happens when government is given unlimited funds to investigate and spy on its own citizens. One thing that troubles me is that we're devoting huge amounts of our national budget to pointless surveillance of the very type you described. That's going to weaken our society. It's going to discourage people from using their First Amendment rights. It's going to actually damage our economy ultimately, because we're taking some of our best minds and we're devoting them to spying on our fellow citizens. And that will harm America. It will not protect America.
Well, and it seems kind of obvious that they don't really want to protect people, that the end goal is not really, they're not looking to protect the public. Like there's some other kind of agenda going on. I mean,
well, sometimes there's an agenda of self-interest. There are entrepreneurs, there are business people, there are mathematicians, computer scientists who are making very good livings, from this type of surveillance. And there are government officials who earn their livings investigating alleged suspects. Right. And so it often becomes, it starts out with good motives, but it often becomes a world unto itself with its own circular existence.
Yeah, like it just, this woman, I watched, there's a documentary called The War on Whistleblowers, and I forget the name of this woman, yet the way she put it was kind of funny, but yet it was like just really true. Like she called it, wait, how did she say it? She said it's like an ice cream cone that licks itself or something like that. Like it's just, this. I swear to God, I know. I thought it was so funny, but the way she said it, it was like, oh my God, like that's so right. Because it just keeps the system going. It's like momentum is basically just kind of taking over.
Well, that's what happens with, any type of government that ceases to follow basic rules. It begins to live for itself, and it justifies its existence. I heard a former government official, Judge McCasey, yesterday say that, well, if we don't do these things, we risk another 9/11. And so what happens is government will say, now that we've started this, we can't stop, because if we stop, we risk another terrorist attack. And who wants to be responsible for having caused that to happen? And of course, that's not a legitimate statement. That's just a way of justifying continued expansion of these programs to the point where the whole country is enveloped in espionage and surveillance. That's not the America we all know. This represents a gross expansion of the surveillance state. In some ways, we're becoming a type of techno-dictatorship in which you can't challenge these secret services. They're beginning to infiltrate all aspects of life, and they become self-justifying. As you said, the ice cream cone licks itself.
I'm just going to quickly read just the last paragraph about and Saunul Sadiq, just to kind of like close off with that. It says, during the time of his capture in Bangladesh and extradition to the U.S., his family said he was stripped of his clothes and wrapped in plastic and later abused and tortured. Upon his transfer to prison in Atlanta, Georgia in the summer of 2006, Shifa was put into solitary confinement where he remained for 3 years until his trial began in August of 2009. Leading up to his trial, government prosecutors requested that no mention of the conditions of Shifa's capture, rendition, or his pre-trial detention in Bangladesh and the United States be allowed into his trial. The judge allowed for this request. Shifa defended himself at his trial. In August 2009, Shifa was convicted of aiding terrorist groups and sentenced to 17 years in prison plus 30 years probation. He's currently held at the Communication Management Unit in Terre Haute, Indiana. And his
what you just pointed to is reflected all across the United States. It's not only terrorist suspects that are treated that way. In all of our state prisons and federal prisons, they have management control units in which people are held in solitary confinement 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Let out for 1 or 2 hours a week, perhaps. And that type of suffering and torture is going on throughout the United States, through prisons all over this country.
I know. And this guy actually originally was sentenced to 60 years. And only through, public attention and public outcry did it get reduced to 17 years. So,
which means he'll be out probably in 13 years. And he's probably served 3 to 4 years already. So in a sense, he's going to be probably in for another 8 years or so, which is somewhat reasonable if he's truly guilty of these things. But if it's exaggerated and he was just a mixed-up young person who idealistically was hanging out with these groups without being a part of them, then there's a real injustice. I would say this. At the end of World War II, we imprisoned a lot of German soldiers. All of them were released within 2 years. In this war, we've taken Al-Qaeda, Taliban people, or just people generally associated with them. They've been held for the last 13 years.
Right.
more than 10 years longer than any German soldier served as a prisoner in World War II, after World War II.
Yeah, that's why, like, it seems, kind of obvious that there's something really wrong here, that there's more of an agenda going on where, it's not about public safety. Like, there's more to it than that, and I mean, I don't want to get into like this huge 9/11 debate either, but, there's a lot of people debating on, the truth about what really happened at 9/11 and, but anyway, Bruce, we'll take a break. It's at the half an hour mark. It's 6:30. And then when we come back, I was going to read a little bit from an article that Chris Hedges wrote about why he's suing Obama. And I was also going to play one of the videos that I recorded last year at the press conference after the hearing of the NDAA. So...
Well, that's great, Catherine. Let me just say that, 9/11 did happen. It was a terrible attack. Much of what we've done is well-intentioned, but now it's taken on a life of its own. And that's where it becomes destructive of constitutional government.
Right. Okay, we'll be right back after this break. Okay, we are back from our break with, Bruce Afran, the attorney, with Carl Mayer, Chris Hedges, Tangerine Bolin, Alexa O'Brien, Noam Chomsky, who are all together, all with Daniel Ellsberg of the Pentagon Papers, like one of the first, well-known whistleblowers, suing the Obama administration over the National Defense Authorization Act that was signed New Year's Eve, 2011. And so during the break, we were discussing what we were going to talk about when we come back. And we're going to talk about Chris Hedges and how he was detained in Iraq, did you say?
Chris Hedges was actually detained in Saudi Arabia by the U.S. military for part of the day. He had left the pool report during the first Gulf War. And
what was the report?
He was part of the military pool reporters, and he left that group and went off on his own to do research. And the U.S. military, without any legal authority, detained him and held him and questioned him, and then ordered that he report to U.S. military authorities. He was detained for several hours, completely without legal authority. On multiple occasions, he has been detained when he returns to the U.S. from the Middle East or Europe. He was actually told, and the court notes this in its papers, that he was placed on a watch list. Now, the only thing Chris Hedges ever did was to report on Middle Eastern activities.
Right.
He has never done anything other than engage in expressive journalistic work. And yet he's been detained on multiple occasions. And that's why we told the court that he is someone who could be brought into this detention statute, since he has been detained on many occasions by the U.S. government.
And
Alexa O'Brien is another one of our plaintiffs, and her group, U.S. Day of Rage, was actually placed on a Homeland Security watch list. And we introduced the document into evidence, and the government never denied it. Judge Forrest gave them a chance to come back and show that the document was incorrect, and they never did. And she noted in her opinion that Alexa O'Brien's group was designated on this Homeland Security watch list. And so they have reason to believe they would be targeted by such a law. And that's the reason they went to court.
And so what did they say when they were detaining Chris Hedges? Like, what exactly were they saying that he was doing that made, why they were detaining him? Or was it anything specific, or he's just being a journalist and doing his research and,
It's because Chris Hedges would meet many of these groups. He would sometimes travel with them, not Al-Qaeda or the Taliban, but other groups in the Middle East, the PKK and others. And so the government would stop him and question him when he returned. Why they do it, I don't know. But certainly that's enough to make a reasonable person fear that this new law could be used against them. Remember,
Right.
the government did those things before any substantial support law existed, before the NDAA was passed. And so if he could be detained without a law, certainly he has reason to think he could be detained with a law.
And what you mentioned a PKK?
So that's a Kurdish rebel group operating in the Middle East, challenging the Iraqi government or the Turkish government. And so he would report on their activities. And he believes that it's because of this kind of work that the government kept stopping him when he would return to this country.
Right. Okay. I was going to read the article. It was actually posted on January the 16th of 2012 at, in Truth Dig by Chris Hedges, why he is suing the Obama administration. He talks about, I'll just start at the beginning. Attorneys Carl J. Mayer, Bruce Afran, and I filed a complaint Friday in the Southern U.S. District Court in New York City on my behalf as a plaintiff against Barack Obama and Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta to challenge the legality of the authorization for use of military force as embedded in the latest version of the National Defense Authorization Act signed by the President on December 31st. The act authorizes the military in Title 10, Subtitle D, entitled Counterterrorism, for the first time in more than 200 years to carry out domestic policing. With this bill, which will take effect March 3rd, the military can indefinitely detain without trial any U.S. citizen deemed to be a terrorist or accessory to terrorism. And suspects can be shipped by the military to our offshore penal colony in Guantanamo Bay and kept there until the end of hostilities. It is a catastrophic blow to civil liberties. I spent many years in countries where the military had the power to arrest and detain citizens without charge. I have been in some of these jails. I have friends and colleagues who have disappeared, in quotes, into military gulags. I know the consequences of granting sweeping and unrestricted policing power to the armed forces of any nation. And while my battle may be quick toxic, it is one that has to be fought if we are to have any hope of pulling this country back from corporate fascism. Section 1031 of the bill defines a covered person, one subject to detention, as a person who was a part of or substantially supported Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, or associated forces that are engaged in hostilities against the United States or its coalition partners, including any persons who has committed a belligerent act or has directly supported such hostilities in aid of such enemy forces. The bill, however, does not define the terms substantially supported, directly supported, or associated forces. I met regularly with leaders of Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza. I used to visit Palestine Liberation Organization leaders, including Yasser Arafat and Abu Jihad in Tunis, when they were branded international terrorists. I have spent time with the Revolutionary Guard in Iran and was in northern Iraq and southeast Turkey with fighters from the Kurdistan Workers' Party. All these entities were or are labeled as terrorist organizations by the U.S. government. What would this bill have meant if it had been in place when I and other Americans traveled in the 1980s with armed units of the Sandistas in Nicaragua or the Farabundo Marti National Liberation Front guerrillas in El Salvador? What would it have meant for those of us who were with the Southern insurgents during the civil war in Yemen or the rebels in the Southern Sudan? I have had dinner more times than I can count with people whom this country brands as terrorists. but that does not make me one. It doesn't necessarily make them one either. I mean, you know, the United States can call anybody a terrorist that they feel like.
Well, you know, Catherine, that's an interesting point because a case really came to my attention from my brother, Neil Afran, who does immigration work. And a man who was admitted to the U.S. in 1995 as a political refugee because he opposed the Taliban and worked with a group, because he opposed the Soviets and worked with a group that was then fighting the Russians in the late 80s, now finds that a new law passed by the U.S. bars him from gaining citizenship because he was associated with what we now call a terrorist group. So back in the 1980s, he was an ally of the U.S., working with groups that we were financing, who were the predecessors of the Taliban, who were then fighting the Russians. And we admitted him under our political asylum laws. But now the same work he did for us as an ally in the 1980s, we now say bars him from being a citizen because we say those groups are terrorist groups or war terrorist groups.
Right, right.
And so we keep shifting the definition sometimes. Now, I believe Al-Qaeda and the Taliban are terrorist groups. But it's very hard to know who are associated forces and who's really Al-Qaeda. Is Hamas Al-Qaeda? In that case, if Hamas is considered a part of that general movement, then Chris Hedges, who has met with Hamas officials, would certainly be subject to detention.
Right.
Suppose a professor, let's take the case of an Arab-American professor who, studying these movements, meets with members of certain groups in the Middle East. Is he suddenly deemed a supporter of the Al-Qaeda network? And what is Al-Qaeda?
Right.
Is it a clear organization? It sounds as if we use it to describe any group that's roughly allied with extreme Islamic movements.
And if I could...
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to point out, recently I was watching Democracy Now! And I forget who the guest that she had on, but they actually were pointing out that Al-Qaeda is larger now than it was right after 9/11.
I think that's because of how we define it. We seem to be expanding constantly.
Yeah.
How we define this entity.
That's what I mean. Like you wonder if the U.S. really wants to get to the root of problems and solve problems, or are they just perpetuating problems? Like it seems like I like to bring up the documentary Dirty Wars, because in that documentary they were pointing out that by dropping drones on many innocent civilians like they do, they're actually creating more terrorists, which I don't...
Well, that's always one of the problems when we intervene internationally. But I would say, look, there are terrorists, and the core Al-Qaeda group are clearly dangerous people. But that doesn't mean that we can pass laws banning those who speak to them or those who speak about them, because that violates our basic speech rights.
I mean, the U.S. is not absolved from criticism. I mean, everybody deserves some constructive criticism. Nobody is above, criticism or being challenged. I mean, anybody that wants unchallenged power, you got to kind of like wonder if maybe there isn't something there.
Well, look, Al-Qaeda uses violence to promote its views, but its views are those that are shared by many other people, and people have the right to speak about those views and endorse them if they want, without the threat of laws that will result in detention simply because you share a point of view by a group that's violent. And if those laws are too vague, then people will be afraid to speak. And that violates their basic rights. Many of us may disagree with the views by extremist Islamic groups. I certainly do. But I can't accept the notion that we can pass laws that punish those or threaten with punishment those who would adopt those viewpoints.
And I mean, right, like what, what else is a journalist's job but to get to the truth and to to try to understand like where people are coming from and to get their side of the story. You have to talk to these people. You have to get another side to a story. I mean, I don't want to make sort of like a little bit light of it, but anyone has been in a situation in their personal lives, even with their own families or whatever, like where, like if two people that are having some kind of a dispute and you're friends with the person that they're fighting with, oh, then that person is not going to be friends with you because you're friends with the person that they're fighting with when that person like didn't do anything to you. Or, I mean, I just kind of like think of simpler versions, than these like larger kind of global scale ones that we're all kind of focusing on. Everyone deals with these kinds of situations in their everyday lives, and if people are truly like looking to have peace and end things, you have to talk to the other side and get their side of the story. You can't be just calling other people terrorists or whatever who have anything to do with somebody that you don't like, or I mean, it just sounds like they're really expanding their power like way too much, and that's their intended goal. Are you still? Did I lose you, Bruce? Oh, sounds like.
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm here. I'm so sorry. I had you on mute for a moment. My apologies.
Oh, that's
I was saying, I was saying that I don't know what the goal of it all is. I think some of it starts out well-intentioned, and then it takes on its own life. There are now tens of thousands of people employed in good jobs, earning good livings, engaged in surveillance and developing interrogation techniques. It's become an industry.
Yeah, that's the scary part. That's the scary.
I'm quite sure we spend at least $100 billion a year on these programs, and it's become a vast industry, and it begins to justify its own existence long after it's needed.
Exactly. So then you wonder, like, so then what is, if people are making money and all these jobs, then if the money becomes the priority over protecting people, then that's not really a good thing. I mean, to have all these jobs based on, terrorism and drone making and things.
It's effectively the same thing as the war on drugs. We've created vast domestic police departments to enforce our drug laws, many of which really are not necessary, many of which don't work. They've created more criminality than they were ever dealing with.
Exactly.
And there are now probably about 2 million people in this country who are in their livings primarily enforcing our drug laws.
Well, then that's right.
These things take on their own self-justification. We need laws. We need to fight terrorism where it exists. We need some people who do this work. But now we've lurched into the wrong direction. Now we've allowed it to overcome all common sense, and we've allowed it to dominate our government to a great degree.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like when money and profit become the focus, like then obviously we're never going to solve these problems, because then people are not looking to solve the problems, because I mean, even cancer, I mean, people say that we could easily have the cure for cancer or even AIDS, but because there's too much money to be made, they don't want to cure cancer. So it's kind of like that.
Well, certainly, I mean, the money we're spending in part could be devoted to other things. With a large part of the money we're undoubtedly, frankly, wasting on surveillance if not necessary, we could probably buy health insurance for the 44 million uninsured every year. And so there are many things we are spending money on in this field that are wasteful and could be directed to other things. But more importantly, it erodes our constitutional government. It erodes the respect we have for constitutional government, for government under law. At every stage where government expands its surveillance and expands its power over the citizen, where we weaken the rules that keep government apart from us, we deteriorate as a society. We degrade as a constitutional government. And so money is one thing, but the real danger is we're weakening our respect for law.
Right. And humanity and people's lives. Just really quickly, I just wanted to mention in the war on whistleblowers, this man, his name was Tamm, Tamm, who blew the whistle at the Department of Justice, where he worked for many, many years on the Department of Justice and their eavesdropping of emails and phone calls of American citizens without a warrant. And he risked his job, his career, to do the right thing, which is exactly what we need more people to do. I mean, how far, into corruption are people going to be willing to go, just to have some fake, career? Because that's what it ends up being, is just a fake career. It's not a real career. So
that's very true. That's very true.
So thank you so much, Bruce Afran, and I look forward to seeing you and getting more updates on. So say it again. I'm sorry. When the Supreme Court possibly can go into effect, the trial. Okay.
Well, perhaps sometime in June the court will decide the case. Generally, it takes 2 to 3 months, sometimes longer. Sometimes the court puts it over to the next term if it wants to study the case more. So, sometime in the next several months we'll have an indication, and we will find out then.
Thank you so much. And
you're very welcome, Catherine.
Okay, enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you. Keep up the good work with everyone at Awake Radio.
Okay, I'm trying. Okay, thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Okay, welcome back to Organic News here on Awake Radio this Tuesday, April the 8th. Again, thank you, Attorney Bruce Afran, suing the Obama administration over the National Defense Authorization Acts. Let's hope that he wins. Let's hope it goes to the Supreme Court and the government and Obama administration's ruling gets overturned. And so we're going to take a little bit of a 180. And we have with us Hashim Lucario Smith. Did I say it right?
Yeah, you said it right.
Who I met just like a couple of weeks ago, who, you were doing things that, like, my favorite subject, like I've been trying to talk to people about for, I don't want to get into the whole age thing, but my whole life I was reading relationship books. People that you might not know, because I was, it was in the 80s, reading like Barbara DeAngelis, John Bradshaw. John Bradshaw was my favorite. He wrote books on, the dysfunctional family system and kind of contrasting, healthy relationships and how they're supposed to work, and as opposed to unhealthy relationships in the family system. And when the parents in the family system are not getting their needs met from each other, and then they start turning to the children to use the children to get their needs met, turning the children into their surrogate spouse, he called it. Just really good, interesting stuff, and how, kids end up developing kind of like a false self if they didn't grow up in a healthy environment. Which, if I could just say this real quickly, I think all of this stuff, it's all connected to the system and crony capitalism and stuff. And it's all part of keeping the system going. and it's all part of inheriting the debt. Like I said in the video that I was actually recording in your talk a couple of weeks ago,
right?
Which is on my YouTube channel, but I'm like, just editing and filling in all the description, and it's a lot of work, and I actually, so the videos are still sitting there with the numbers and the letters.
Okay.
But I will get to it and post it and give you the links to those videos too.
Okay, cool.
So, okay, why did you get involved, and what exactly is the title of your work? Like, what do you title yourself?
Well, yeah, I'm a dating and life coach. So I basically, help people with their dating lives, their relationships. I help motivate people to achieve their goals. Like it's basically just self-improvement. And the thing that, I find important, and even what you were talking about earlier, is that, in society now, there's a lot of people out there who are living their lives, but the lives that they're living aren't really the type of lives they want to live. They're kind of living within, they're living within what they feel they're supposed to, live and supposed to be and supposed to do. And nobody's really tapping into who they really are and what they really want and what they really want for their lives.
Exactly.
Right.
It's like people's authentic self is literally like buried alive inside, like wrapped around this like fake self.
Right. And it's like that on purpose because,
exactly.
The thing is that, you have corporations out here who, they want to sell you things. They want you to, buy into certain things. And in order for that to happen, you can't have really independent thought. If you have independent thought, it's too hard for them to, pinpoint what to sell you or how to sell you things. And, there's nothing wrong with selling people things and being a salesperson, because I'm a salesperson too. But the thing is, when you're trying to do certain things to manipulate people or the masses to have them think or act a certain way just so you can profit off of their ignorance, then that's when it becomes ridiculous.
Exactly. They used to talk about with money and stuff, the rich. It's like, helping the rich get richer, and then the wealth will trickle down to the people. Like, give me a break. Like, it's like, who wants to be in a relationship with somebody who's just going to give you a trickle?
Yeah.
Right. So, to me, all of this stuff is connected, right? Exactly the way the system works. And, I don't call it capitalism because to me, it's not healthy capitalism. It's complete, like, abusive and dysfunctional capitalism. Mm. And I'm not sure if I mentioned to you when I met you about Edward Bernays. They called him I don't know I think it's the grandfather. I was going to say godfather of human relations, of public relations. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I mentioned this guy to you.
I've heard of him though. I've heard of him. I think wasn't he someone that was hired to teach people how to market to people or something like that? Or am I right? You're right.
He was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and all the big corporations used to hire him so that, making with the advertisements and stuff so that they could brainwash the masses. It was all about manipulating people's desires to get them to buy shit that they don't need, like manipulate them, make them feel bad about themselves if they're not driving this car or, so there's an awesome documentary. It's really, really long. It's like 3 hours, but it's so good. Everybody should watch it. It's called The Century of the Self. And they call it the Century of the Self because that's what they were trying to put it under the guise of just like hedonism and like self-fulfillment and buying this and buying that, just to like be satisfying and being some kind of an addict or something, like some kind of a pleasure addict.
Right. well, you know what it is too? It's that, it's weird because when it comes to like, people buying stuff and people selling stuff and everything like that, I always looked at it as, people should be, allowed to just have an independent thought. And the thing is, you can, but what happens in society is that you're bombarded not only with the media, but also with, people who are around you or who surround you that are constantly coming down on you for being an independent thinker. So it's like, they want to like basically, go down your throat because you might not agree with what the masses are saying is good or what the masses are saying is the thing and everything. So it's kind of like you're looked at as an outsider. You're looked at as a troublemaker. You know what I mean? You're looked at as like, there's something wrong with you because you're not going with everybody else. And, what I teach people, because I have my slogan is called, and I say it's the truth is inside you. And basically what that means is that, your truth and what you understand is right for you is already inside you. You already know it, but it's that like you said, the real self has been killed, and it's like, or it's deep down shoved and suppressed. So people kind of forget exactly what they want, or they forget what's going to be best for them. And they're kind of just going along with what society says they should do or they're supposed to want. And that's what kind of makes everything kind of, out of whack and kind of ridiculous. So,
I'm really, really glad that I have you on because, I actually feel like a weight kind of being lifted off of me right now because just listening to you speak, like you say everything that I'm always saying.
Right.
And to have someone else say it besides me, like I can literally feel myself getting just a tad bit lighter.
Right.
Because, I was just insights, they just kind of pour out of me sometimes, I'll hear something on the radio or whatever. And I'll get triggered and, I keep a blog, but a lot of times I'm not always like on the computer to be writing a blog. So what I just started to do was write the blog to myself on my cell phone, while I'm in the subway and I don't have any signal or anything. And then when I get a signal, I'll just email it to myself and then I can just copy and paste it and put it in my blog. And just most recently, because to me, this is huge, the thing that I've been trying to get across to people for for decades, since the 80s, is that, everything that we were taught as kids is all done by design.
Right.
Just every, my big thing, because I did, fitness and just mental and physical, emotional fitness all my life. And one thing that I just always try to get people to see is this manipulation of our emotions and how, because it happened to me when I was growing up. It's like, you're not allowed to feel what you feel. It's like your body's natural responses are just manipulated and rewired, to satisfy your parents or, whoever. And so my whole life, I'm trying to practice meditation, which helps people to build and strengthen that relationship inside of themselves, like a muscle. It's like you got to exercise the muscle. Parents are supposed to be cultivating their children organically, to be I like to call it organic people instead of GMO people. I mean, people are supposed to be authentic people. You're supposed to be natural. And if you can't just have your natural feelings, because, nature isn't wrong. The body isn't wrong. What the body, feels is correct. And I feel like people get caught in we inherit this psychological deficit when you're not allowed to feel what you feel. It literally puts the body into a psychological and then a physical deficit, which can make people physically ill over time, without a doubt.
Right. I agree. Because, the thing is, it's like, who you really are is important, because who you really are is necessary for, this existence, for the world, for people to, because a lot of times, like let's say if you were having a certain feeling a certain day, or you thought about something, or you was going through some trouble, and sometimes you even hear people say this, where they say, I heard someone speak and it made me feel different. And maybe I actually connected to what this person was saying. And if that person's honest, and they're being honest, and then it connects to something that's within you that's honest, and then that gives you that experience that you're going to have in your life. You see what I mean? But the thing is that when you're surrounded by a lot of people who are acting fake, and usually a lot of people are being fake because they're pressured to be fake by society. They're pressured to go along with the Joneses, or go along with the nonsense. It's like, it doesn't feel right. Something feels off. And sometimes you can't, it's kind of like that, what's the movie, The Matrix, even kind of touched on this a lot, where it was just like, you have this fake world that they put in front of you, but then there's this reality that they're hiding, and then there's something that you see that's just not right, and you feel it, and you're just like, there's something going on. And this is what's happening in society, a lot, where people are pressured into, because the thing is, it's safer to be, to go along with something, even if it's not like the greatest thing, which is the stuff that's going on in society right now. It's safer to do that and fit in, versus to have your own independent thought and to go to the left or whatever, because you can blend in more. Nobody's gonna point fingers at you. You're not gonna be threatened. So if some people say, hey, I'm just gonna like fall back, so
that's what's so scary, because okay, like you teach workshops and classes on mostly like dating and personal relationships, but like all the things that you're saying extend to your workplace and your job,
Exactly.
So exactly, like why should people be living their lives? Most people do things for money, so they sacrifice like who they really are just to have some job, and pay their bills, and then that becomes like it never ends. And then before you know it, like your whole life went by, and you never did what you wanted to do. You never pursued the dreams, or spoke up, or did the things in life that really mattered to you. And so what? Somebody please explain to me, what kind of a freaking life is that? And okay, so even if people are not 100% like miserable at their jobs, but they might not be like completely, like it's not so satisfying either, because just like personal relationships and marriages and stuff, I always I have this sort of scale, right? Like this health scale that, okay, so you might not be like physically ill, but you're not optimally fit either,
Right.
And so when it comes to your personal relationships or your job, there's all kinds of degrees. It's like, okay, so you might not be like 100% miserable, or maybe you kind of like your job or your marriage or something is okay, but it's not optimally fit. It's not as like satisfying. Like you're not as in love with your spouse as you could be. Like you're not as in the peak of your job as you could be, and that's, like on a health scale, that's kind of the way that it's supposed to be. Like we're supposed to be living so much healthier. Like I like to just focus on health, like not politics, not the economy, because all those things are fake man-made stuff. But anyway, like people, they don't want like all there is to have in life, and like the rich and the powers that be are taking it all for themselves. They're taking all the money, they're taking all the power, and leaving the little guy with like less and less, like the polar bear's iceberg that's just melting smaller and smaller and smaller, all for what? Like for some fake piece of paper. And in the end, when you get to the end of your life, like people are going to be like really sorry that they didn't take some kind of a leap, to change their lives and be authentic and listen to that ever so soft buried voice inside of them, like why didn't you it's like, I mean, again, it's not easy, but
right. It's the fear, really. It's fear on everybody's part, as far as individuals in society were scared to take that leap and be ourselves. So, and the thing is, like I was saying before, with so much pressure, so much things going on, and like I was saying, it's just easier to go along with the other thing. It's like the fear is going to stop most people from doing what they want to do. But the thing is that I always tell people, it's if you're brave enough and bold enough to be yourself, right? That encourages others to do the same thing. The only reason why there's so much nonsense going on in society and it is because we've been encouraged to live our lives the way that the media and society has been telling us to live it. So that's what's been conditioned in our mind. But if you have a group of people that say, hey, I'm gonna do things how I feel that I need to do for myself and to be of service to others and to, do positive things. If you have more and more people doing that and then they see more and more people doing it, then that's what's going to happen. But the thing is that there's a threat to the structure of society when people start thinking that way. And this is why, there's so many people that when they are thinking independently, this is why you have so many people who are trying to always get at them and trying to put them down and trying to say they're crazy and trying to say that they're, they don't know what they're talking about and this is ridiculous, because they don't want it to get, society as a whole and these corporations that are running things, they don't want it to get out that, being yourself and being, having independent thought and being positive and working with people like this is a good thing. They don't want that to happen because that's going to crumble their structure down. You see what I'm saying? So
exactly. So this is kind of a good point, actually, where I can tie in this conversation that we're having with the previous conversation that I was just having with attorney Bruce Afran over the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, because that was actually like what came up in the conversation was that for money, for profit, because, right, like keeping this sort of terrorist thing going, there's so many people that are making money off of making drones, people that are working in the Department of Justice or the Department of Defense, like eavesdropping and listening in on people's conversations and stuff. And that's just it. It's like, as long as it's always just going to be about jobs rather than being about standing up for what's right, we're never going to win if people always put money first. And money, do people even know where money comes from? Like the Fed that just creates money out of thin air by entering some digits into a computer. I mean, it's not even real. And so that's what I'm saying. It's the people at the top, the corporations, the banks, like the people with all the money and the power, they want to keep all the money and the power and get more and more of it for themselves at the expense of humanity. I mean, they'll kill off and completely murder, like tens of thousands of people or hundreds of thousands of people, like just to maintain the power. And I think that that's exactly what's going on, and that they're not going after terrorists and they're just using all this stuff as an excuse. And they actually create more terrorists because they drop drones on innocent people. And it's only natural that, some family at a wedding in freaking, Yemen or whatever, like watching their family members blown to bits, is going to want to retaliate and freaking perhaps attack the United States. I mean, to me, that's not like a terrorist. That's somebody who's kind of just being freaking normal, I mean, that's like saying that the United States is the freaking terrorist and that person is just acting in like self-defense.
Right. And, the thing when it comes to like money, like you were saying, like, these corporations want all the money, they want, things to go down like that where they have everything. And, it's mostly because, money, it's not even like the money actually just equates to power, and they want power over everybody. They want power over everything. So the thing is, this is why, when you're growing up, they encourage you to, when you're in school, they're like, hey, it'd be cool if you're student of the month, because then that prepares you to get a job and become an employee of the month. But they never teach you of, to be actually proud of having your own thing, having your own business, building your own wealth, because they don't want that to happen. They want you to be a worker. They don't want you to be an earner, because the thing is that if they don't want you to be the person earning a living having their own business. And the thing is, because if the more you have feeling like they're dependent on the system, then the system can always, control, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, how you think, how you should think, because now you're in constant fear of losing that job. You're in constant fear of not making this money to pay your bills, to eat, and all this other stuff, because you've been conditioned to be dependent on those people. And a lot of it, like we said in the beginning, a lot of it is manipulation, just to give back money that you've made back to them. You see what I'm saying? Because you work a job, you get paid, but you give all the money back. You buy a lot of crazy stuff. You spend a lot on this and that. So it's kind of like you're still really a slave in this job. So it's like you really have no power, and that's the way they want to keep it. And this is the reason why they don't want you to have independent thought. This is the reason why they don't want you to be yourself. You know what I'm saying? And because it's a cycle of you always being subject to them. You see what I'm saying?
Right. And that's why, the kind of stuff that you're talking about with personal relationships and family and all that is extremely important, because the weird thing about it was that, like, when I was growing up, because I didn't grow up in a good family environment at all. And I did not want to repeat that. I mean, I was like, no freaking way, Jose, am I going to want to repeat where I came from and perpetuate that. And so I did everything I could to try to, break the vicious cycle. And, not just in my personal, family relationships, but also in a job. I mean, I wanted, to have a job where I would be respected. I would be, valued, for my ideas and feel like a valued part of a team. And so by reading and learning a lot about, the family system and how, just healthy relationships in general are supposed to work, I took, all the information that I learned from reading John Bradshaw about the family system, and I took it with me when I went to work. And I thought, well, it doesn't just apply. I mean, healthy relationships are healthy relationships no matter where you go, whether they're in your personal life or at work. So you still want to work in a healthy environment also. I mean, when you go to work, you don't want to feel like you're oppressed and your boss is some kind of an oppressor and because you need money, so you have to kind of be a slave, and you can't speak up and you can't express your ideas because, that's kind of the way that I grew up. It was like, this is my house, you got a roof over your head and blah, 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 blah. So if you want to live in this house, you got to give all your rights, And the weird thing about it, I'll just say this and then I'll be done. The weird thing about it is because it happened to me at a young age, before I got programmed. And so my instincts and my authentic self, kind of kicked in. And I fought, with my parent, really badly, because it's my body just instinctively knew this is not right. This is not a healthy environment. You're wrong, the authority, I challenged authority, really early for many, many years, even though I didn't get a lot of support from family or neighbors or anything like that, so I always felt like your work environment should be a respectable, healthy place to live too. And, and not exactly the kind of environment that I grew up in, where it's okay, because we own, your paycheck. So, you have to give up your life, in order to get it.
Right. And what it is too with working and everything is that, I've noticed, I mean, and people probably have been in these situations too, where if you're dealing with, like, let's say customer service, or you're dealing with, a specific people in a specific job environment or whatever, and there's a lot of people who are, I would say, like, quote unquote unprofessional, or things don't get done right. Like, for example, I had to go to the doctor one time, and I was basically like, I needed some papers from another doctor. And then the doctor that was supposed to send over the papers, they didn't really send it over. And then we had to go through this craziness. And the reason why that happens a lot of time, where things aren't going the right way, is because people who are working and people who are at their jobs don't really want to be doing the things they're doing. And this goes all to what I'm saying, where you're not being who you are, because if you're being who you are, you would have, and if you were not fearful and bold enough to be yourself, you would figure out, what is it that I really want to do that I can contribute to society? Because a lot of people who are just working, they're just working because they want the paycheck, not necessarily because, they actually like what they're doing. And I understand that, you have to, pay bills and everything like that, but that, even in itself, the fact that, the whole bill, you have to pay bills, comes into, it comes into play with what we're talking about, where we're in a society that basically, it forces you into that type of zone where you actually you end up doing something you don't want to do just to survive. You know what I mean? And that's the problem with society today. You know what I mean? It's like,
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, what kind of a life is that? Like, this is what I mean. Like, I stopped kind of blaming the elite, or whatever I'm not even going to call them that. Scratch that word. They're not elite. I just call them like the powers that be, or whatever. It's like, that's why, like, I stopped blaming them, and I kind of like blame the little guy, because they're the ones that are just accepting of their lot in life,
Right.
and they're just going to work for a paycheck rather than really having a life. And that's why the powers that be are going to treat us the way that they do, because the little guy is the one, like, they're in on their own, like, enslavement.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that if you're just working for some paycheck, and you're not really, like, advancing, like, you're not evolving, like, that's not a life. Like, you're not living a life. You're basically kind of like just some menial existence. But Hashim, I just was gonna have Paula, like, take us on a quick break.
All right, cool. Sounds
good. And then just for a few minutes, and play some tunes and commercials, and then we'll come right back. Okay, we're back from our break. We still have Hashim Lucario.
Yep, you got it right.
With us, and we're talking about, personal relationships, healthy, fulfilling relationships, dating. So yeah, just talk a little bit about the issues. I mean, like, when you gave the workshop a couple of weeks ago, the topic of, honesty. I mean, right, of course, like, honesty in relationships. You can't have a relationship without that.
Right.
And so, but again, honesty is in direct conflict with the way the system functions, where it's all about, like, not telling the truth and kind of putting up that false image, and not really, like, showing people that you're hurt or vulnerable or afraid or things like that.
Right. Well, it's weird, because, like, everybody wants honesty, but it's kind of dangerous right now, to be honest, with certain people, because, people look at, there's people out there, they'll look at what you're saying, what you're doing, and they'll say, okay, wow, well, this person told me this, so I'm going to try to get over on them because of this, or this person told me this, so I'm going to do this and do that. So it's like, whenever you're honest, it's like people are scared that their business is going to get out there, or they're scared someone's going to take advantage of them, or they're scared of being ridiculed for being honest. So it's like, honesty isn't respected in today's society. And that's really what the problem is, and even when we talk about, dating and relationships and stuff like that, and it's like a lot of people have issues with their dating lives and in relationships because of the lack of honesty, because people are scared that them being honest is going to, scare people away, or they're not going to find someone being honest. So it's kind of like, let's say, for example, you have if you go on an online dating site, you have a woman who's in probably her mid 40s who will lie and say she's like in her late 30s because she's like, well, if I tell them I'm older, I might not get that many guys, responding to me. Or a guy might say, I make $100,000 even though he makes 30,000 because he's like, well, let me lie so I can get more women to think I have more money. So, people are playing off the lies because they actually want to get something. They want to get a person. They want to be with the person so bad that they're like, okay, I feel like I have to do this because this is what people respond to. And the reason why people respond to these things is because we've made it, such a big thing in society where that is what is valued, when we deal with people, instead of just getting to know the person, seeing if y'all connect, seeing if, if we're actually compatible on an honest level. People are saying, well, what do I need to do or say or think or be in order to get to attract these people, instead of just being themselves and attracting the people who like them for them. And that's the thing where people, this again, it comes to fear. People are scared to be themselves because they have a fear of losing out. They have a fear of not really, attracting these people. And this is why, they lie. Like I was saying earlier, it's easier to go with the nonsense of society, which is the lying, to get what you want versus being honest. And you might have to work a little bit harder because when you're honest, you're working against, what is set out here. You see what I'm saying? And that's what crazy.
That's what makes it so difficult to change, not only the system, but ourselves. And if I could just add that, it kind of goes along with the idea of debt, because the only way to, it's kind of like this perpetuation of the debt, because, when you were talking about honesty, I guess you could sort of use it interchangeably with like living in reality. Honesty is reality. And a lot of times it's just like too painful, to live in reality, and people have had so many experiences or rejections, by maybe being honest, so that it's very difficult for them to reveal certain things because other people in the past have used it against them in some way. And so I don't know why this just came to my head, but okay, for instance, this is just this weird example that I've used in the past. It's like trying to glue something back together, and the instructions on the outside of the box of glue says, make sure surface to be glued is clean and dry.
Right.
If you try to glue pieces back together that have dust or wet or fuzzy or whatever on it, it's not gonna, the adhesive won't work. And I just kind of think sort of the same thing about relationships. It's like, for relationships to work, you got to strip off all the old stuff. Mm. It's not gonna adhere otherwise. And if, as long as people just have all the old, tape and adhesive on top, it's literally impossible to have healthy relationships with people.
Right.
At work, or in your personal life or anywhere.
Right. No, it's true. It's absolutely true, because, it's a hard thing, because, it's like if you're even honest with yourself, right, and you're an honest person, you still have to deal with a lot of people who might not be honest. And then you also have to work at finding people who you are honest to really, interact with. And, it's a difficult thing to do when you're, when you're in a world like this where it's encouraged, or it's, not, and the thing is, it's really subtle, because it's a lot of times, people, if you ask anyone, hey, do you want people to lie to you? Everyone's going to say no. If you say, do you respect people that lie to get what they want? People are going to say no, but we do this all the time. You know what I mean? And a lot of people do it without even realizing or thinking it's a lie, or thinking that this is, deception or whatever. But it's like we're conditioned to do this because we've had it done to ourselves. So we say, hey, forget all this honesty stuff. Everybody's lying and everybody's playing me. So let me just, try to do it and get what I need to get. So then it continues. So it's like it's hard for people to, really be honest. But the thing is that if you want to, find honest people, and you're an honest person, it's really up to you to carry that torch to be honest and lead by example. And a lot of people don't really, have the strength to do that. And that's where people really need to work on within themselves to be that example, because, it's only going to happen if people are the ones that's going to make it happen. Because, like we were saying earlier with companies and corporations, none of these companies can thrive without people buying their stuff, or none of these companies can thrive without having the employees to work for them. So, it's really a group effort, but it's that, they treat you as if you don't really matter. You understand? If you're working for these companies or whatever, they treat you like you're expendable or whatever. But the thing is that the reason why they're able to treat you that way is because the collective consciousness, they know that 9 out of you 10 people are thinking the same, or are going to do the same things, or you have that, that mob group mentality. So I can do and say whatever I want because I've already tricked you or conditioned you to think a certain way. So all I got to do is say this one thing, and then I know that 9 out of 10 of you are going to do this. So I have control over you already. And this happens because, it goes back to people really not being honest with themselves and not being honest with other people. And that's why things are, kind of like crazy now when it comes to like people relating to each other. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, the whole like not being honest with yourself is definitely because there's a lot of people that I think again, like I don't even know if it's conscious, but people just like don't admit things, and I don't know if really like if they're doing it on purpose, if it's automatic, if it's like a program, but I kind of like feel that people do it a lot. And if I could bring up this one topic that really bothers me a lot is like people are always talking about like, being positive all the time, like like what does that mean? Like, be positive all the time. It's like, see, like, like to me, that's something that's like programmed in us that needs to be changed. Because me, I'm all about like I basically just try to live my life. My theme is to just be close to nature, just be as close to nature and try to, develop a relationship with nature as much as possible, not just, outside with trees and grass and things like that, but internally, like in your body, listening to your feelings and what you really feel. And so it's really difficult, I feel like, to get people to admit and show like what they really feel, especially like vulnerable feelings, pain, hurt, fear, or like what they how much money they really make, or the inadequacy, the insecurity that they feel. And exactly, like we're never going to change anything because it's just like the economy. Like I think I might have said something like this in your workshop. It's just like the economy. Like we have to be honest about who we are, because we're always going to just be perpetuating the debt if we're not honest in relationships. And if the relationship even if it does go somewhere, we won't be able to maintain it. It'll be unsustainable, just like the economy that we're living in. And sooner or later, somewhere down the line, the relationship is going to come crashing down. And who wants that to happen when you got a mortgage and like 3 kids?
Right. And it's interesting about like what you were saying earlier about like, thinking positive and everything like that. The thing is that, when it comes to positive thinking, and I actually have a book coming out called What's Good, and it's about, being happy, positive thinking, motivation and stuff. And I was talking about in that book where people don't really know how to think positive, which is why just saying to be positive or think positive, it doesn't work a lot of times because people don't really know what that even means and that entails. And the reason why is because what we look at or deem as what is positive, a lot comes from what we've been conditioned to think of as, what is going to make us happy. So for example, we need to have awareness of what is good in our life, which is I named the book What's Good because it's about what's actually good in your life. And the thing is that people look at things like, well, I need a car, I need a lot of money, I need a lot of women, I need a big house. So they look at that as if I don't have that, then there's something wrong. So if you tell someone to think positive and in their thoughts, positivity is those things, they need to attain or gain those things in order for their life to be positive. But that's not really necessarily what they need, but that's where their mentality is. Therefore, them thinking positive will never really work because their positivity relies solely on those, specific outside things. You understand? So when I say, to actually know how to think positive, it's more about realizing like what's actually good in your life, which can be even, the littlest of things like, you actually woke up this morning and, you were able to breathe, little things like that, where that's positive. We're actually living on this earth and you can actually make change and make, things better for you and your family and things like that. So those are the things that actually matter. You know what I mean? But a lot of times we've conditioned to think that the brand new sports car is the only thing that matters. And therefore it's going to be impossible for you to think positive because you're going to say to yourself, well, I can't be happy unless I have this expensive sports car. You know what I'm saying? So that's where the minds of people are at. So it's going to be a hard thing. So it's really just a shift in the person's mind to recognize what, to be, blessed by the things that you have, the things that are surrounding you, having a loving family, having things that are really, actually important in your life, saying, well, there's nothing wrong with having an expensive car, but do you really need this? Do you really need to have this? And also you thinking you need to have this is actually, you being conditioned by society and these corporations telling you this is your only ticket to happiness and to positivity.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So
what I was going to say was, right, like in response to like, oh, be positive, like, oh, be happy. Again, it's like, I don't believe that it's natural to be, happy all the time. Like we're not supposed to be happy all the time. If you feel like shit, like that's good. It's good to feel like shit if you feel like shit. It's good to feel angry if if you're feeling angry, sad. If you're feeling legitimately happy, then feel happy. Like to me, I just think it's again like more about being real, than I don't believe in being fake. It's better to
being
just
honest, right?
Whatever is real, and so you have a better chance of changing things. If you're honest and you're admitting what you feel. We're never going to be able to change things. We're never going to be able to manifest what it is that we really want if we can't admit where we're at, And this is like, I got into yoga practice a really long time ago because of stuff like this. And the reason why I love this practice is for this reason, is because, yoga practice is all about doing the pose that you can do in your integrity, and it's kind of like a metaphor for life. It's really like the way, like yoga is life. It's like really trying to teach people how to live life. And, like, so it's not just your physical posture, it's also like your emotional posture in life. Because in order to build your pose and be able to do eventually these like pretty challenging poses that, some people can do, you have to accept where you're at. Like when like, this is why I talk a lot about the mind body connection, because one thing that they always used to talk about in some of the yoga classes I've taken in workshops upstate is that the mind can create whatever it wants. Like the mind can make up whatever it wants, but the body always lives in reality. The body is always in the here and now. So it's by constantly bringing the mind back to the present moment, back to the body in present time and space, that you can only, you can make your dreams manifest. Because you can't make your dreams manifest through your head. Your head alone can't make your dreams come true. Only, like the body can birth your dreams and and give birth and manifest your dreams. It has to come through the body. It can't come from the head. And people don't have a really good relationship. Their mind-body connection is all screwed up, Right. And to me, it's the key. The mind-body connection is the key to changing the world and getting people out of the head, getting people out of their thinking and bringing it more into the body. Because we have to accept the reality of where we're at, where the state of, the world is at, the economy is at, the environment is at, in order, so it's kind of a bit of a paradox, actually, that it's like, the more that we accept where we are, kind of as much as we don't really want to, that actually helps us to propel, the direction that we want to go in. And that's why, the economy is kind of a mess, because they're always hiding, like they're always lying. Like nothing is ever going to change if we don't accept the reality. It's just that simple,
Exactly. That's absolutely true. That's the thing. It's like, it's like when you're in a Alcohol's Anonymous meeting, when they say, "Hey, I'm Joe, I'm alcoholic." You have to accept the fact that you're an alcoholic so that you can move forward and get help for, being an alcoholic. It's the same. Right. So like you were saying, it's like, because, people, you see people walking around as if there isn't like a problem with the economy. Everybody's still, fronting and faking with all the flashiness and all the stuff. So when other people are, when a person's going through hard times and they see like this going on, they're like, oh man, like, is it just me? Like, am I the only one going through this? But that same person who you see with the brand new sports car who's in debt, they don't tell you they're in debt, but you see that they have the sports car, but it's like, so it's this whole different thing. And now we're not, it's like, collectively, we're not in unison to actually say, hey, there's actually a problem here. Let's try to fix this. You see what I'm saying?
And then look at the whole mortgage scandal too. And like Wall Street, like these people, it's like a predator system where they're deliberately, just to have money and just to have power, like you're like, I mean, so like, right. Like, do they want to instill in everyone like that to get what you want in life? Like you're just going to screw over like other people,
Right.
I mean that like, so, right. Whatever happened to doing things honestly, like that's what I'm saying, like getting ahead or making money by actually helping people rather than screwing people over.
Right.
And having like win-win situations and taking the time, it's all about, because nature is very slow, nature does things slow and it takes its time because it does things with quality. But in this world, like they create money out of nothing. They can do it in 2 seconds. So that's why like nature and the way that the system works, is completely at opposite ends of the spectrum, and we need to, bring them back together again and have the economy and the monetary system and goods and services be in more alignment with the environment and animals, and other cultures and poor people that are being like wiped off the face of the earth because they can't keep up with it all.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy out here. It's crazy out here because it's like it sucks that you have so many people who are feeling the same exact way that we're feeling.
Right.
And you'll be in a room with 10 people and all 10 people are feeling the same way, but no one's going to voice this. No one's going to say anything because as soon as one person says something, everybody's looking at everybody else to see what they're doing to give them the cue to do what they need to do. And it's just like that's the problem with society, is that since independent thought is gone, or or not necessarily gone, but it's suppressed, then it's like you don't have people who are going to step up and be honest and be who they really are, and then you have so many people who are just followers and copying everybody else. So everybody's just copying everybody else who's following everybody else, which is ridiculous, So that's how it goes.
Yes, this is really excellent, and I'd love to have you back on again. Where can people find you? Like, what's your Facebook and your?
You'll find me at MrLocario.com. That's MRLOCR.com. LocarioTV.com. So you can check me out for those, or you can go to my blog site, iLookSexyNaked.com. That's my blog, and it's a metaphor. It means look good being yourself. You have nothing to hide. So nakedness, you have nothing to hide. So iLookSexyNaked.com. So you can. I have books, DVDs, all that stuff on relationships, dating, personal development, that good stuff. So you can check it out all there.
Sounds wonderful. I'm glad you can be on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much, and thanks for teaching people, because this is a really important subject.
Definitely.
Thank you.
You guys have a good night.
You too.
All right. Take care.
You too. So that is it for this Tuesday's Organic News here on Awake Radio. Please tune in next Tuesday at 6:00 and be your authentic self. At least try, even if it's uncomfortable. Thank you.